couple of days ago, I put out a video talking about beginner tips for this headset right here, the PSVR2. And while a lot of those tips apply to all headsets, there was one thing that I didn't cover that a commenter called Grey Matter Shades put in the comment section saying that they're kind of disappointed that I didn't. And after thinking about it, yeah, it's a great suggestion. What they pointed out is that I didn't really cover motion sickness and how it can affect virtual reality for people who've tried it for the first time. I realized that I've been using VR for so long that it's something that I don't really think about anymore, but to a beginner, it can be completely off-putting. It can be the difference to falling in love with VR or giving it up forever. So today, we're going to tackle the top issues with motion sickness, how it's caused, how you can alleviate it, and how long you can expect for it to go away. It's a very big issue in the VR scene that a lot of developers are trying to tackle, but it's up to you, really, to figure out how you're being affected by it, if at all, and what you can do about it. So, let's get into it. Before we get into it as well, if you'd like to subscribe, that would be perfect. If not, I completely understand, but it's completely free, of course, and it's the easiest way and cheapest way to support me, as we've just hit 10,000 subs and we're on our way to our next goal of 20,000. Seems a bit of a long way off now, but we are getting there slowly but surely, so thank you all for considering that. Anyway, let's get on to how to alleviate motion sickness. To give us a baseline, we need to cover what motion sickness actually is. And in a nutshell, it's feeling off and, well, sick after playing virtual reality. This is because your brain might think you're moving in-game or doing an action, but in reality, your body knows that it's stationary. Take, for example, walking or climbing in Horizon Call of the Mountain. As you move forward in the game, your brain thinks that you should be moving forward in real life, but your body is telling you that you're stationary in the real world, which you are. This leads to you becoming disoriented and feeling really, really uncomfortable, and this led to the term being coined as VR motion sickness. Now, before you buy your headset, maybe you're on the edge and you don't know whether you're going to be affected by it, there are a couple of ways that you might be able to figure out whether motion sickness will affect you or not. For example, if you get queasy when you're on boats, on the sea, or say on a plane, you might feel the effects of motion sickness in VR more than other people. For me, luckily, I didn't really run into it too badly, but I know some people that really have, and even on games like Gran Turismo, when you're sitting down in the cockpit of a car, which should alleviate it a little bit with blinders on, they still feel quite sick. The causes in-game can be very, very harsh movement. Inconsistent frame rates can really do it for some people, but what can you actually do to alleviate it at all? The tried and tested formula for alleviating motion sickness is to play in short intervals. Pick a time where it's not too hot, which I know especially in the UK during the summer, this week especially, has been very, very hot, so VR probably would have been off the table for a lot of people, but try and pick a time where the temperature is a little lower to make yourself feel less hot and overwhelmed. And play in, say, 15-minute segments, taking breaks in between to drink some water and make sure that you're feeling alright. If you run into any signs of motion sickness and feel like the world is spinning around you, the worst thing to do is keep on playing. Some people might think that they can just push through it, but that most of the time is not the case. And the few times that I have encountered motion sickness, like in Eve Valkyrie, the spaceflight simulator back on PSVR1, I just had to put the headset down. I tried to push forward, but I just couldn't. And it is for the best to just sit it down for a bit, take a break, and then jump back in when you feel alright. After 1 to 3 weeks of doing this, you'll probably feel a lot more at home in VR. And it's by this point where the magic sort of kind of fades away around virtual reality and you become more acclimatized to it. And by that point, you should feel alright to turn on smooth turning or smooth locomotion instead of teleport and snap turning. Speaking of teleportation and snap turning, these are all examples of accessibility options designed to reduce motion sickness. If you go into the menus of basically any VR game you own, there'll be options to turn on blinders, reducing your field of view and making it so that you feel less sick when you're moving or turning. Options to turn on snap turning, meaning that the world won't spin smoothly around you, which can make you feel sick. And options to have teleportation movement, meaning that you won't have to move smoothly forward and you can teleport from point to point, completely removing the motion that triggers your brain to think that you're moving in real life when you're not. All of these options are really, really good to have on if you struggle with motion sickness, but over time, as you become more acclimatized to VR, I would recommend turning them off one by one to enhance your immersion. I, for one, in this point of my virtual reality playtime and life, I can't really go back to having these on, but I remember back when I started in virtual reality, for a good week or so, I did have them on just to be safe, and they do alleviate the symptoms of motion sickness to a good extent. As Shades of Grey Matter pointed out in the comment as well, it's a good idea to stick with stationary games to start. It might not be the best decision to try and blow you away with virtual reality, but to ease you into it, games like Moss Book 1 and 2 the upcoming Max Mustard, Job Simulator. All of these are good examples of games that keep you stationary for the most part, or move you just a little bit and keep you anchored in the world. All the movement that you do will be by you, essentially, instead of being moved against your own will or by a joystick. And you'll find that these all acclimatize you to virtual reality and being in a space that isn't real a lot better than jumping into a game, say, like Saints and Sinners, where you're mashing up zombies and moving through the world, or Horizon Call the Mountain, where you're climbing and ziplining all over the place. As well as there being quite a few games to recommend in terms of virtual reality and reducing motion sickness and getting used to it, there are definitely some games to avoid as well. For example, even though I absolutely adore the content and story of Vertigo 2 and its amazing gameplay, that game might be one to hold off until you're a bit more of a VR veteran in terms of how you feel about motion sickness if you suffer from it, because its frame rate does dip occasionally throughout the runtime, making it feel a bit inconsistent in terms of you being planted in the world, and that can trigger motion sickness for sure. Flying around in games like No Man's Sky may also be a bit much. So just take a look at the content of the games you're buying before you buy them. But at the end of the day, if you buy a game that is too motion sick inducing for you, you can just wait a little while till you're more acclimatized and then have something to look forward to in terms of picking it up later. As a rule of thumb, seated experiences are a lot more manageable than standing ones. It's a lot easier to lose your balance and be disoriented and basically fall over than it is to be seated in a roller coaster type experience or something like that, when you're in full control of where you're going and how you're sitting and what your body is doing. The main message of all this is just to pace yourself. And I also want to thank the commenter at Grey Matter Shades who pointed all this out and pointed out the big hole in my last video for beginners, and hopefully this has alleviated that hole and made it so that this is something accessible that you can kind of learn from if you're suffering motion sickness. I'd say keep at it, keep taking breaks, keep playing VR. It's a medium that is definitely worth the motion sickness at the start if you do suffer from it, because it can lead to some amazing experiences. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Thank you to our patrons and YouTube members Luke Bentley, Phil Irving, Hazit Mirza, Ace Gamer, Hippie Pickle, Jin007, A License to Chill, Sun, WTF, Hiosco, and Fat Controllers, and Jason Parker. If you'd like to join the Patreon or YouTube membership, all those links are down below, of course. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.